You insert the Majora's Mask cartridge into your desolate N64. Instantly you feel that this Zelda game is different to all others around it. The purple glow mixed with the sinister looking mask that plagues the logo of perhaps the darkest game in the Zelda series shows up. So how does it succeed at being the creepiest Zelda game by a country mile? Well, let us begin with the first thing that you see when actually loading up the game. The black screen of peace that precedes any game. Suddenly the peace is disrupted by a maleficent force. The main antagonist of this entire game, found seconds after booting up the N64. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory. This confirms that this game is different to any Zelda game before it. It makes a significant change from the more light-hearted Ocarina of Time. It marks a different antagonist's turn to mess with the Hero of Time. It marks a mask with the malevolent forces of a dark god. As the mask levitates away from the screen, a new sort of creepiness begins to crawl up your spine. This music. The music in Ocarina of Time was grand, and let you know that this was an adventure that will decide the fate of Hyrule. This music is just like village music. This establishes that the townspeople are probably unaware of the havoc that could ensue over just the next 3 days, and weirdly enough, there is actually one thing that the player can see on the title screen if patient enough: the moon. This is the same moon that can genuinely haunt your mind if you were a child. I mean, it's objectively creepy throughout the entire Zelda community, and I'm sure that anybody would agree with me. I'd like to reiterate, Majora's Mask is by no means a scary game, but rather creepy. It's not a game full of jump scares, it's a game full of semi-depressing topics at times. Let me pass this on to the next scene of the game, talking about different side quests and stuff, and obviously roaming around Termina. The opening cutscenes of the game sets the mood from the get-go. Link is travelling through the woods on his trusty companion Epona, and immediately you feel alone and cold, separated from the world. This is where we first meet the masked imp wearing a creepy mask called Majora. He gives you a sickly feeling whilst also feeling fascinated with what's to come. Eventually we enter the world of Termina, after Link falls down a gaping black ditch. Various symbols allude and eject towards our very faces as Link continues to freefall. The symbols represent the adventure that awaits Link. Many believe that this black void is actually a portal to another dimension, a dimension very different to the land of Hyrule. This game is incredibly depressing. Just spending 5 minutes exploring Termina's main hub Clocktown will give you a feel for the dark tone which this game sets so perfectly. The moon that stares down upon us at all times with its depressed, horrified expression will physically give you chills. The very residents of Clocktown are fearful of the moon crashing and killing everybody. Guards and construction workers argue frantically within the mayor's office. The construction workers plead with the mayor that the moon will not fall and that the people of Termina should just stay and enjoy the carnival of time that is held every year to celebrate the four gods of Termina. But the guards insist they must flee, for the moon will fall. And even the mayor and protector of the town is unsure of what to do, giving us ourselves a sense of panic. Every crack and crevice of Termina is filled with pain and sorrow. Looking down every alley there is another man or woman who is hurt, filled with depression and problems. This game is filled with death. This game impacts us so much because throughout our own lives we experience these very emotions. We relate to Majora's Mask so much because we feel the very pain and haunting feeling that the residents of Termina feel. This game does it so much differently to all other Zelda titles. It doesn't just have dark moments, it's constantly tragic, and fair to say relentless for its dark atmosphere. Now, let's discuss the heart of all of this depression and creepiness, these side quests. Each of the residents' reaction to the moon. The terrifying section of land are dubbed as a carnivale. But first, the side quests. Majora's Mask is synonymous with amazing side quests. It's known as the Zelda game with the best side quests to many. And in that department, I see it as unrivaled too. Some of these side quests further the story and even add into the scary atmosphere surrounding Termina. Just as a small mention, this was the first game to feature the hand in the toilet. Perhaps not inherently terrifying, but for some that could induce a sense of dread. To enter the third dungeon, the Great Bay Temple, Link, the hero of time, must find and take Epona to the Great Bay. This would turn out to be one of the most scary quests present in the game. To acquire Epona from Romani Ranch, Link must first listen to a story given by Romani. A story of a certain genre of horror. A story of extraterrestrial life. She states that they come at night, every year when the carnival approaches. On screen you're then shown something reminiscent to nothing seen in the Zelda series. And as the alien stereotype goes, they're seen taking cows from the farm. Link must then vanquish these aliens and save the rancher's cows from a much greater source of evil. When first considering it, this doesn't sound scary in the slightest. In fact, it's just the same stories about aliens that we've heard from pretty much any extraterrestrial heavy movies of an older age. But when you put yourself in Link's shoes and delve further into this, a young boy, no older than 10 years of age, given the hero of time has seen so many things terrifying to an average human at this point, but nothing as amazing as life beyond the world that he lives in. Before I talk more on a much more dastardly side quest, giving you the most terrifying mask in the game, let us discuss further on the previous paragraph. The black void that Link plunges into while in the search of the school kid. He finds himself in the same tree he decided to explore. Then a cutscene plays. The school kid stands in front of him, mocking him. School kid tells Link that he disposed of Epona. Again, this shows a drastic change of atmosphere to the before grand Ocarina of Time. The Mask of Majora is then used. Link feels something is wrong, and his eyes open. He's being marauded by Deku Scrubs. He finds the opening and runs away from them. Little does he know that in this dream segment there's a Deku Scrub following behind him. And as the hero wakes up, Link, the hero of time, the killer of Ganondorf and Ganon himself, is turned into a measly Deku Scrub. From the off, this game shows the player that the antagonist isn't playing around and will show the hero no mercy, nor the residents of Termina, whom Link must save from certain death. Let's have a final look at a side quest. Now there are many side quests that I could add to this list. Cafe's Dilemma, the quest of saving a father in Akarna Valley from turning into a Gibdo forevermore. But there's one side quest that tops them all in this game in my opinion, and it has to do with this grandma, the side quest that first introduces you to the All-Night Mask. Of course, this side quest isn't fleshed out at all, but it is scary and that is the topic of this video. Now at first glance, when getting the All-Night Mask, aside from the terrifying design, you may think, this is cool, I can now acquire the heart piece for staying awake during the grandma story. But when you take a deeper look into this quest, and more importantly into this mask, you'll see that the mask is not what it seems. For anybody that has little to no clue about what I'm talking about, let me explain the All-Night Mask and what it does, though I feel like it should be sort of self-explanatory. The All-Night is used by Link to stay awake for a prolonged period of time to listen to a grandma's story. This rewards the player by giving Link a heart piece. From a gameplay perspective, this makes a ton of sense, but I think we need to talk about the lore behind this mysterious mask. Knowing that the mask is used to keep the user awake for as long as they need to be, it's been theorised by many and it's safe to assume that this mask could have been used to torture the user with this fact. The torture could have worked in a way so that the poor user who the mask is latched onto would have to stay awake for prolonged periods of time, slowly turning the recipient completely crazy. In fact, the design seems to show that the mask latches across the ears of the user, locking it in place, possibly even with a key. Never mind just Majora's Mask, this item is terrifying and compares to none in the Zelda series. This just shows us players that the Zelda team really wants to change the tone of this game in comparison to the lighter tones of the games before, even with these small but amazing changes. Of course, most of us probably know the story of Ben Drowned, and I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you to check out a video I've linked in the description from Nayru. It's a rereading of Jadusable's Ben Drowned video with some other Zeldatubers. I don't believe the video gets half the recognition it deserves, however, I will still explain it very quickly and less detailed here. The creepypasta is an amazing piece of fiction created by the already mentioned Jadusable. It grows through how he gained the courage of Majora's Mask and creepier things happen to him until the end of his story. It's very engaging and I suggest you take a look at the video in the description. My point here is that the one defining feature of Ben Drowned will be the Statue of the Elegy of Emptiness. Even non-Zelda fans know of this story because of this figure. The doll alone is enough to scare someone, never mind the terrifying but fictional story that goes along with it. I wish I could go into more detail, but this video would go on for way too long. Penultimately, I'd like to discuss the inside of the moon. Skip along the video if you don't want spoilers for Majora's Mask. After walking around the entire map and saving all 4 giants from each corner of the map, the player is tasked with going inside of the moon to stop all of the madness that Majora's Mask has caused. A final showdown, if you will. The scary but weirdly ironic part of all of this is just that Majora wants friends. This is why the Moon Children ask for masks from Link, because Majora is really just a lonely dude who needs to feel some happiness. That is why he's caused so much destruction, and I know that this isn't lore, but some manga confirms this. I won't get into it, but the point is that he caused all of this suffering, and the reasoning is because of his pure loneliness. This developed into a hatred of people in general, therefore making him an evil that has the power of an amazingly powerful and villainous god. Truly scary that loneliness pretty much developed the story of Majora's Mask and is something that we can experience in daily life. Next, I'd like to talk about one more thing that this game does to set this creepy atmosphere, and in fact it's one of the very last things, so technically I guess this cements the creepy atmosphere and how it's utilised. There's infinitely more that I could discuss, so leave some comments about some scary things you can think of in Majora's Mask. When turning to a Deku Scrub, the player is tasked with traversing through a sort of tutorial area in the trees, to better understand the scary capabilities and situation that the hero is now in. I mean, the hero of time was a Deku temporarily. What? As you walk through these rooms, you'll probably notice a small wooden fellow. Clearly it was a sort of Deku that had died wandering the area before Link started to travel through the desolate wasteland. He seemed petrified in a way. I don't believe we know why or how he was killed, but it's pretty safe to assume that it was down to the school kid in some sort of capacity. Without getting into too much speculation on this poor Deku's death, let us talk a small bit about the Deku Butler. He's a side character to be sure. However, the Deku Butler leads us through a Dampe-like race. He explains to the hero that this was the route that him and his son used to take on races. But unfortunately, he hasn't seen his son in days. He hopes to see his son soon. And I'm sure that you've all figured it out by now, or just know of this story already, but this Deku was the poor Deku Butler's son. When this first dawns on the player on a first playthrough, it is heart-wrenching. Especially if you forget until the end credits. If you stay and watch the entirety of Majora's Mask's credits scene, you'll notice that the butler is crying on the same Deku you aimlessly wander by at the beginning of the game. Absolutely horrifying stuff. Even if it wasn't solicitly scary, this showed the player how much genuine grief the school kid gave to the innocent clock town, and that it could have been even worse if the moon was to land on the village. Now, let's get into why I think the game succeeds with all of this going for it, and when setting this atmosphere up. The reason I think this game succeeds at what it does is because it doesn't rely on these pepped up jump scares seen in recent games. Some examples include Five Nights at Freddy's, and many others in the last few years. Back when Majora's Mask was made, the way to set up a scarier or darker game was purely to scare the player implicitly. So you're not outright scared when playing the game, but it does affect you in some way emotionally. The music just builds upon this. Clocktown's earworm of a theme, the Elegy of Emptiness, the Song of Healing, all of them, they all have one connection. They were all made with the sole purpose of having an effect on a player. And back when Majora's Mask came out, immersion was a hard thing to create. That's why I believe that it succeeds at scaring players implicitly. By using music and set pieces amazingly and really putting an emphasis on characters, the game makes the player feel for the characters. And in turn, the game rewards you with an experience that many people will never forget. And I can only hope that Breath of the Wild 2 will rival this game in any sort of way in this department. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I've had this video planned since April, so it's nice to finally have it out there. If you enjoyed, then please do tickle that there like button and subscribe for more weekly Zelda content. All of my social media is in the description. I have a Patreon, so if you'd like to join these wonderful people on screen right now, then if you can and want to, consider donating some money. You get some benefits from it yourselves as well. But make sure you can, as I want to make sure everyone who watches me is getting on alright, especially in the current climate. For our last time, thank you so much for watching this video. Have an amazing Halloween, as I won't see you before, and I'll see you all next week after spooky season. Please stay safe.